I'm assuming that this next piece will be new to most of you. There may be a few of you who have heard it before. I think it's a great piece, but it is about 40 minutes long. It's got 5 movements, and so I think it might be helpful if I give you a bit of the backstory, which is, I think, rather interesting. You know, we are hearing music from the golden age of Vienna, which is to say the turn of the century, the last century. And of course, it was not only a golden age of music, but also art and literature and science and philosophy. And one gentleman who was pretty much at the center of all of that was this rather formidable looking man named Karl Wittgenstein, who was a very, very wealthy industrialist of the day. He was a steel tycoon, and he built himself a mansion in Vienna. And he had an arts salon there, and many of the greatest artists and writers and musicians of the day would come, and they would rub shoulders there. People like Brahms and Mahler and Richard Strauss and Hugo von Hofmannsthal and Gustav Klimt. And he had a daughter whose name was Margaret, and that's a picture that Klimt painted of her in 1905. This is Margaret Wittgenstein. And this is her brother Ludwig Wittgenstein, and if you are a philosophy buff, that will be a familiar name to you. And they had another brother whose name was Paul Wittgenstein. And he was poised to become one of the great pianists of the day. And in 1914, the war broke out, and he joined the Austro-Hungarian army, and he went off to fight. And he was wounded severely in his right arm, and it had to be amputated. And so, being an indomitable Wittgenstein, he decided that he would go ahead and still become a pianist, but he would only focus on left-hand repertoire. And so I'll give you a sense of the kind of left-hand pianist he was. In 1933, he recorded a piece of salon music by a gentleman named Raff. It's pretty amazing. I mean, I'm fighting off the urge to say you've got to hand it to him unsuccessfully. Anyway, there wasn't all that much music written for left hand alone, so being extremely well fixed, he decided to commission it. And so he is the one who commissioned Ravel's Piano Concerto for left hand. He commissioned works from Prokofiev and Hindemith and Benjamin Britten and Richard Strauss, and 2 pieces from Erich Korngold of concerto, and also this piece that we're about to hear for piano left hand and this unusual combination of 2 violins and piano. And it begins, as you'll hear, with the left hand coming out and announcing itself as the central protagonist of the piece in this very dramatic proclamation at the beginning of the prelude. And eventually the strings join in, and this leads to a fugue. Based on this theme, this is Bach's name in German musical nomenclature, Si, La, Do, Si, and you can hear how Bach used it in the final contrapunctus of the Art of Fugue. And so Korngold took that and expanded upon it, and made that the subject of this fugue. But as you hear, it's not one of these austere neo-Baroque 20th century fugues. It becomes very romantic, and it seems to look ahead to his Hollywood days. You can hear, I think, foreshadowing of the scores to Captain Blood and Robin Hood in there in the first movement. The second movement is very nostalgic and very wistful. It's called Waltz. And to me, I think it has a great deal to do with the music of Richard Strauss, and particularly the music he wrote for his opera Der Rosenkavalier. And the theme of Rosenkavalier is really the destruction of an era and the passing of time and passing from one age into another. And the major protagonist is the Marschallin, who is this beautiful young woman who over the course of the first act begins to realize that she is becoming middle-aged. And so the end of the first act of Rosenkavalier shows her leaving her boudoir and heading off out the door and into the unknown of her middle age. And I'll play you just a minute of it, so I'll tell you why in a second. And I'll play you a little of the end of the second movement of this. I fight off the urge to say the second act of this piece. I can only imagine that Korngold, he was sitting there in 1930, a Jewish composer leaving his 20s, entering his 30s, but more to the point, seeing the destruction of the society that he grew up in as the Nazis took over in Germany and in Austria, and contemplating his own exit to come later at that time. And the third movement is a more perhaps defiant take on all of that. It's very, he calls it grotesque, which is a good way to describe it. The music, it sounds like maniacal laughing in the face of destiny. At least to me it sounds that way. And if the second movement was an homage to Richard Strauss, the fourth movement, I think, is an homage to Gustav Mahler in these ecstatic, transcendent, slow movements of his symphonies. And it is based directly on one of Korngold's own songs, in which he asks the musical question, "What are you to me?" Very romantic music. He wrote this song the year before he wrote this piece. And you can hear it's called Song. The music is essentially the same. And the last movement is this amazing compositional tour de force. He builds this huge edifice out of a rather simple, old-fashioned melody which serves as the theme for variations. So as you see, it's a piece that I like a lot, and I hope that you will like it too, particularly if this is your first time hearing it. To me, it seems like the perfect culmination for this concert, because everything we heard in the first half in one way or another comes back in this, and yet there's also this sense of farewell to this beautiful age of the golden age of Vienna, as life there in 1930 was poised on the edge of complete destruction. So I hope you'll enjoy this piece.